You walked past 100 strangers today? Maybe more. On the sidewalk, in the elevator, in the checkout line at the store. You didn't think about a single one of them. But somewhere beneath your awareness, your brain was working very hard, sorting, scanning, filing each face into a category faster than you could blink. Safe, not safe. Us, them. You think this is normal. You think a world full of unfamiliar faces is just the water you swim in. But the real answer is far stranger. Because for almost the entire span of human existence, the word stranger barely meant anything at all. There was no one for it to describe. And the machinery in your skull that decides, in a fraction of a second, whether a new face is a threat was built for a world that no longer exists. Let me take you back. For roughly 300,000 years, you lived in a small group. Your ancestors moved across the land in bands of a few dozen people, maybe 100, on a good year, when several families gathered. That was the entire social universe. That was everyone. You knew all of them. You knew their faces, their voices, their tempers. You knew who could be trusted with a spear at your back and who could not. Every person you encountered in a normal life was someone whose history you already held. There was no anonymous crowd. There was no sea of faces. There was only the group, and the group was small. How small? A scientist named Robin Dunbar spent years trying to answer that. He compared the size of the brain's outer layer across dozens of primate species and noticed something. The bigger the social group a species lived in, the bigger a certain part of its brain tended to be. Keeping track of who's who is expensive. It takes real neural horsepower to remember who owes you a favor, who betrayed you, who is sleeping with whom. When Dunbar ran the numbers for humans, he landed on a figure that has followed him ever since. About 150. That, he argued, is roughly the number of stable relationships your brain is wired to hold. The number of people you can know as full human beings, with inner lives as real as your own. Past that, the faces begin to blur. They stop being individuals and start becoming a category. Sit with that number for a moment. 150. How many faces did you see today? For almost all of human history, that limit was never a problem. You would never meet 150 people, let alone more. So your brain evolved a shortcut. A single, ancient rule. If you don't recognize them, be careful. And here is why that rule made sense. In a world of small bands, an unfamiliar face was not just unfamiliar, it was information. It meant someone from beyond your group. And beyond your group meant possible competition for food, for water, for territory, for mates. The stranger might be harmless, but the ancestors who assumed harmless and were wrong did not become your ancestors. The ones who felt a flicker of caution, who tensed just slightly, who kept their distance until they were sure, those are the ones who lived long enough to pass their nerves down to you. So your brain built a threat detector, fast, automatic, and deeply unfair, and it is still running right now. Then, about 10,000 years ago, everything broke. Humans learned to farm, and farming changed the deepest rule of human life. For the first time, food could be grown in one place and stored. You no longer had to wander to survive. You could stay, and so people stayed. Villages formed, villages grew into towns, towns swelled into the first cities. And suddenly, for the first time in the history of your species, you were surrounded, every single day, by people you did not know. Think about what that means. A brain calibrated for a group of 150 dropped into a settlement of thousands. The threat detector, tuned for a world where an unfamiliar face was rare and meaningful, now firing constantly, uselessly, at a crowd of harmless neighbors. The hardware never changed. It couldn't. 10,000 years is a blink in evolutionary time. Far too short to rewrite something so old. So your brain did the only thing it could. It kept running the ancient rule in a world it was never designed for. That is the ghost you carry, a Stone Age instinct wandering through a modern crowd. Now, here's where it gets stranger. You might think this us and them reflex needs a real reason, a real difference, a real history of conflict. It doesn't. It needs almost nothing at all. In the 1970s, a psychologist named Henri Tajfel set out to find the smallest possible spark that could divide people into groups. He gathered strangers who had never met and sorted them into two teams. But he made the teams as meaningless as he possibly could. In one version, he showed people dot patterns and split them into those who supposedly overestimated the dots and those who underestimated. In another, he divided them by which of two painters they preferred. That was it. No shared history, no conflict, Nothing but a coin flip label, and then he gave them the chance to hand out rewards. What happened next should disturb you. People favored their own group over and over. They gave more to the team they'd been randomly assigned to, and less to the other, even though the other was made of people exactly like them, sorted moments earlier by nothing. There was no reason to care, and they cared anyway. Tajfel had found something chilling. The line between us and them doesn't need a real difference to appear. Your brain will draw it over almost nothing. A jersey, a dot, a flip of a coin. Why would a mind do that? Because for your ancestors, the label was never really about the label. It was a stand-in. In the ancient world, not from my group was a genuine warning sign. So your brain learned to treat any marker of difference as if it might carry that same ancient weight. The instinct doesn't care that the marker is trivial now. It only knows the old rule. Different could mean dangerous. Sort first, ask later. And once that line is drawn, it can harden fast. Decades before Tajfel, a researcher named Muzafer Sherif ran an experiment that has haunted psychology ever since. He took a group of ordinary boys to a summer camp at a place called Robber's Cave. They were similar in nearly every way. Same background, same age, strangers to each other at the start. He split them into two groups and, for a time, kept them apart. Each group bonded. Each invented names for itself. And then Sherif brought them together in competition. It did not take long. Within days, the two groups of ordinary boys were insulting each other, raiding each other's cabins, hoarding, taunting, treating the other side as an enemy. No ancient feud, no real grievance. Just two lines drawn on a blank slate, and the old machinery roaring to life. Sherif watched hostility bloom out of nothing, the way it has bloomed out of nothing across all of human history. You feel the discomfort of this, don't you? The sense that something in us tips too easily toward division. It does, and modern neuroscience can show you where it happens. A researcher named Susan Fiske, working with a colleague named Lasana Harris, looked inside the brain as people viewed images of others. Normally, when you see another person, a region near the front of your brain quietly switches on. It's the part that helps you imagine what's going on inside someone else's head, their thoughts, their feelings, their humanity. It's the reflex that makes another person feel like a person. But when Fiske and Harris showed people images of those they'd been primed to see as the lowest, most rejected outsiders, that region sometimes stayed quiet. The brain processed them a little more like objects than like people. Read that again slowly. Under the right conditions, your brain can dim the very signal that makes someone else feel human. That is not a moral failing you chose. It is the oldest, most dangerous edge of the same instinct that helped a small band survive. The ability to stop seeing an outsider as fully one of us. This is the inheritance. A mind that sorts in milliseconds. That divides over nothing. That can, at its worst, quietly switch off another person's humanity. None of it is your fault. All of it is your responsibility. Because now, look at the world you actually live in. You don't move through a band of 150 anymore. You move through millions. And when you close your eyes at night, you don't retreat into a quiet camp. You open a screen. And that screen shows you a river of strangers, endless, faceless, scrolling past forever. Your ancient threat detector, the one built for a rare, unfamiliar face on the horizon, now faces an infinite horizon of them. Every argument in the comments, every faraway conflict, every headline about them. And the feed has learned your instinct better than you have. It knows that nothing holds your attention like a threat from an outgroup. So it feeds you the outsider, again and again. The angriest face from the other side. The worst example of them. Your Stone Age alarm, ringing all day, pointed now at people you will never meet, sorted into enemies by a machine that profits every time you feel the old fear. You were built to know 150 people as human. You are asked to feel something about 8 billion. The gap between those two numbers is where so much of our cruelty lives. But here is the part that matters. You are not only your instinct, you are also the animal that can notice the instinct. You can feel the flicker of wariness toward a face and, for the first time in 300,000 years, ask a question your ancestors never could. Is this real? Or is this just the old alarm, firing at shadows? Sherif's boys, by the way, did not stay enemies. When he gave the two groups a problem that neither could solve alone, a shared goal that forced them to work together, the walls came down. The insults faded. The line between them blurred back into a single group. The same brain that builds the wall can dissolve it. It only needs a reason to see the other side as us. That is the quiet power you carry. The category is not destiny. The stranger is only a stranger until the moment your brain decides otherwise. And that decision, unlike almost everything else in this ancient machinery, is one you can actually make. So tomorrow, you'll walk past 100 strangers again, and your brain will do what it has always done. It will sort and scan and file each face into us or them, out of a habit older than language, older than farming, older than the cities that made strangers possible at all. But now you know the machine is running. Now you know it was built for a world of 150 faces, not a world of billions. And in the small space between the flicker of caution and what you choose to do next, you get to decide whether the oldest rule in your mind still gets the final word. 100 strangers. Or 100 people you simply haven't met yet.